Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Kerry Kriger. I am the founder and executive director of Save the Frogs, which is a worldwide amphibian conservation organization dedicated to protecting amphibian populations and promoting a society that respects and appreciates nature and wildlife. Welcome to Save the Frogs Academy. This is our first class of, I guess we'll call it the fall 2013 session. And I'm really excited to be here talking to you all. We've got a bunch of new people on this call, as well as some familiar faces. And so I guess I'll start by just telling you what the agenda is for the next hour or so. I'm going to take the first 40 minutes or so and introduce myself and then talk about amphibians. Just give you a quick summary of what's going on with frogs, why they need help, how you can help, what Save the Frogs does. And at some point, I'll give classes that are much more in depth on the individual topics I'll be discussing today, such as threats to frogs. One day we'll do a class on nothing but threats to frogs. But today I just want to give you a quick summary of everything. And then at 5:40, I'm going to talk for a little bit about Save the Frogs Academy, what it is, what it can be, what my vision of it is. And at 5:50, I'm going to tell you about upcoming classes that we are offering that I hope you will also attend. And at 5:58, I will give you all an assignment that will be very easy, I think, but very important. And then we'll officially end at 6. If anyone needs to go, they're welcome to. So that's 6 my time, which is an hour from now. But I will stay on the call and allow you all, if you want to, if you have a microphone and want to introduce yourself, then you'll be welcome to do that. Just a quick minute or two introduction. And then I can take any questions you have about anything frog, Save the Frogs, or Save the Frogs Academy related. So to begin with, this is me in the picture with the Save the Frogs shirt. I'm Dr. Kerry Kriger, and I guess I'll just tell you how I got to where I am and how I got to be talking to you all about frogs. I grew up in Virginia, east coast of the USA, on some land that had a pond on it, and that was near the Bull Run National Park, where there was a lot of wild space and rivers, and I spent a lot of time outside at ponds and streams. So I got to like nature, and I definitely saw a lot of frogs growing up. Virginia has a lot of frogs. And I actually was always into math and science, but never thought of environmental science as a potential career just because I didn't know anyone in it. And I guess my teachers never talked to me much about protecting the environment and environmental careers. And so I went to the University of Virginia and studied mechanical engineering. And by the end of mechanical engineering, which I finished and got my degree, I realized I was way more into protecting the environment and spending time outside in nature. So I went to Hawaii and volunteered one summer studying endangered birds with some PhD students from the University of Hawaii. And that was a really great experience. And from that, I was sure I wanted to go on to do a PhD in environmental science myself. So I wasn't ready to go back to school. I spent the next 7 years or so traveling around the world, studying music and working some random jobs, which eventually became my main job was a private tutor of math and science. I taught all types of math and chemistry, physics, biology from basically kindergarten up through university level. And so I got a lot of experience teaching math and science, and I learned a lot from that and definitely wanted to continue down math and science. But what I really like to teach is the things of most precise importance to me, which at this point in my life, one of those things is protecting the environment. So I eventually went to Australia and spent 4 years there doing my PhD research on an amphibian disease called chytridiomycosis, caused by a chytrid fungus that I'll be talking to you about. And actually, in a few weeks or maybe a month or so, one of these Save the Frogs Academy classes will be me talking about chytrid fungus and my PhD research and what we can do to protect frogs from the chytrid fungus. So I hope you'll check that out too. So anyway, during my PhD years in Australia, I spent a lot of time out in nature, walking up and down streams, going to ponds, looking for frogs. And I sampled about 3,000 frogs, which meant that I caught 3,000 frogs. I let them go, but so I got to know a lot of frogs and spent a lot of time with frogs. And I really enjoyed working with frogs. Frogs are really awesome. And by the time I finished my PhD, I was quite certain that frogs had not been saved and that there was an incredible amount of work remaining to be done to protect frogs. And I came back to America, and my original plan was to do a postdoc, which is a year or 2 or 3 that people often do after they finish their PhD. I had assumed I would do that, but when I was thinking about what would be the most important project for me to do, it was quite clear that there was no nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting amphibians, and that amphibians needed a lot of help, specifically with people educating the public about them so that the public knew that the frogs were in trouble, which I certainly know that even to this day, most people still don't know frogs are in trouble. And that's a big problem. It's hard to protect something if there's no public awareness related to it. And I also wanted to make people actually care about frogs, know why they're important, and get some work going to get frog legs out of restaurants, get dissections out of schools, get habitat protected, get better legislation in place, make sure that we could defend frogs that had laws already on their behalf that were possibly being ignored. So I started Save the Frogs about 5.5 years ago. It was early 2008. And I guess about a year ago, I really started thinking about how can we solve one of what I consider one of our major problems, which is we need to get lots of people like you educated about frogs, amphibians, how to save them, get lots of you involved, volunteering, doing Save the Frogs projects and helping out, and making sure that we have a generation of people who are very skilled in protecting the environment so that in the future we'll have a lot less environmental problems because we'll have so many more people working to protect the environment. So to solve that problem, I thought Save the Frogs Academy is what we need to do. So we need to get all of you educated about amphibians, and the way that we're going to educate you is by involving you directly in our programs. So that we'll have a lot of people helping out getting these programs done, such as getting atrazine banned or getting frog legs out of restaurants, Save the Frogs Day, getting it into lots of schools around the world. So I'm glad that you're all on the line, and I hope that as we go through these Save the Frogs Academy classes over the next couple months, you will start feeling much more adept at your own abilities to save the frogs and create a tangible difference in your local area, or perhaps some larger area, as we do work worldwide and can always use your assistance on international projects as well as local projects. Okay, so I'm going to get going and talk to you about frogs. As I said, come about 50 minutes from now, we'll open it up to questions. Hopefully, I'll answer a lot of your questions. So we're called Save the Frogs, but we do save amphibians. And there are 5 main groups of amphibians. Frogs just happen to be the most well-known of them. This is the Pacific chorus frog, and it's the most common frog where I live, which is in coastal California. And this is a common frog that's quite loud, so a lot of people know it. Very similar to the frogs are the toads. Toads are technically just a type of frog. The main difference between a frog and toad is toads tend to have a huge gland that you can see behind that eye, and it's packed full of toxins to protect them. Toads tend to have dry, rough skin, short legs, but there are frogs that have all these qualities. So in reality, there's not much difference between a frog and a toad, and that's why they're generally just lumped together as frogs and toads. Next group is the salamanders, and the salamanders have that very visible tail that you can see. This is one of the common salamanders in the Santa Cruz Mountains in California, and a lot of these salamanders you can find certainly in California if you just go outside in the wet season and roll over some logs. Be sure to put the log back how you found it because something's living under there. And you'll see salamanders under the logs because the logs keep it cool and moist, and it keeps them protected from predators. Now, one other way to protect yourself from predators is to be a newt, like a California newt. And they've got lots of toxins on their skin, so they taste really bad, so most animals will not want to eat them. So newts and salamanders are essentially the same. And then we have the final type of amphibian, the caecilian. Caecilians, no arms, no legs, and most of them have very reduced eyes because they spend most of their time underground, which means they're called fossorial. And these caecilians we don't have in the United States. They're in Central South America, Africa, Southeast Asia. A lot of people confuse reptiles and amphibians, but there are some pretty significant differences. So this rainforest dragon is a reptile, and you can see it's got scales, but amphibians don't have scales. And also reptiles like this tortoise have hard-shelled eggs like a bird, but amphibians have very different eggs. They're jelly-like. That's why amphibian eggs, like these ones, which are in a river, amphibians always put their eggs in wet places such as ponds, streams, lakes, bogs, swamps, fresh water, not salt water. And even if they live on land away from water, they'll have eggs that they put in moist leaf litter. And the amphibians become active during the rainy season generally because if these eggs dry out, they will die. So that's the primary reason amphibians become active in the wet season and hang out in wet places. Amphibian means 2 lives, one on land and one in water. Not all amphibians are amphibious, but most of them are. Another big difference between reptiles and amphibians is metamorphosis. Here's a tadpole. Most frogs and toads, but not all, have a tadpole stage. They have a tail, they have gills, they're potentially herbivorous, and then they start to change to metamorphose, which means to change shape. And their tail absorbs back in their body. They pop out legs, they pop out arms, and then they crawl out of the water with some lungs to breathe. And when they're in that middle stage, like this guy is, they're called a metamorph. So you can see they still have that tail, but it's going back into their body. And then they're a juvenile, adult, and eventually will be reproducing and completing the life cycle. And so this mating embrace is called amplexus. Frogs have generally speaking, external fertilization. Another cool aspect about frogs, and one that is very important for their survival, and one that makes them able to be harmed by chemicals that get in the water, is that they have permeable skin. They can absorb oxygen and water directly through their skin. And that means they'll also be absorbing whatever else is in the water. Amphibians are called gape-limited predators. That means that they will eat anything that fits into their mouth. And as adults, they're carnivores. So any living animal that fits in their mouth, they will eat. And it doesn't matter if it's a sack of eggs or a mosquito, a fly, or another frog. They're happy to eat it if they can grab onto it. As I said, I grew up in Virginia, and we've got some pretty cool frogs out there. Where I grew up, there were about 7 or 8 species right near my house. And this is the gray tree frog, which I'd hear a lot when it would rain, and it would go. And all frogs have their own unique call. It's called an advertisement call. They are advertising to a potential mate, and they're also using their call to defend their territory. And only the males are calling. Females may have an alarm call if they're in trouble, but essentially it's only the males that are calling. Green frog is a big frog. Bigger the frog, the deeper their call. This frog is like, ooh, ooh, as opposed to a spring peeper, a very small frog that's famous on the east coast of the U.S. because it's one of the first frogs to come out in the spring, and it's a signal of the springtime coming. So when the ice is thawing, the spring peepers come out. Very small frog. Beep, beep. So I went to Australia, and I did my PhD research in some very beautiful national parks, such as Springbrook National Park, where Purlingbrook Falls is. And I was lucky to spend a lot of time out there catching frogs at night. Most frogs in most places in the world are nocturnal, meaning they come out at night. Here in California, there are certainly frogs that are diurnal, means they're active during the day. But in Australia, they're almost all nocturnal. So I go out to Purlingbrook Falls at night and look for cascade tree frogs. And sometimes I couldn't see them because they're small, and if they're on leaves, they're camouflaged. So if I wanted to find them, which I had to do, because for my PhD research, I actually had to catch them briefly. And so I'd be not only looking for them, but I'd be listening for them, and they'd be going, and sometimes not only did I have to listen for them, I'd actually have to call to them to elicit their call. So if I couldn't find them, then I'd have to go, and then if I did that well, some male who was probably annoyed by me infringing on his territory would respond with a, and then I'd get closer and be able to find him. So I got good at making frog calls, and little did I know that making frog calls is a great way to get people into frogs, especially if they're kids and you're talking in their classroom. So I encourage all of you to practice your frog calls so that you can go give presentations on frogs and get everybody making frog calls like an emerald spotted tree frog, which would go meh. Or my favorite frog, the southern orange-eyed tree frog, found on the official Save the Frogs logo. Southern orange-eyed tree frog lives out in the rainforest, and when it's pouring rain, they'll be out going, Pobblebonk gets their name because they go bonk. Eastern sedge frog, you can see his vocal sac, which he fills with air, creates pressure, and then goes. Great barred frog, one of 5 species of barred frogs, all which live in Australia. You can see the bars on their legs. This is the only species of barred frog that is not endangered. 4 or 5 barred frog species are endangered. So this barred frog, big frog, deep call, or striped marsh frog, and the marsupial frog. All right. So I'm going to tell you why amphibians are threatened with extinction. It's important to know the threats to frogs if we hope to save the frogs, because our job is to remove or lessen those threats. And right now, amphibians are perhaps the most threatened group of animals on the planet. Certainly, they're the most threatened vertebrate group. At least 2,000 amphibian species are threatened with extinction. Threatened with extinctions means that we can expect them to go completely extinct if we do not do anything about the current threats they face. There are well over 1,000 frogs in the world that are considered data deficient. That means we don't know much about what's happening to their population. Usually we don't know much because their populations are so small that they're just difficult to study. If they have a small population, they are very prone to extinction. So the true number of species that are threatened with extinction is likely well over 2,000 species. There's 7,000 or so total amphibian species, of which about 6,000 are frogs and toads, 800 are newts and salamanders, and there are about 200 known caecilian species. So it's about 1/3 of amphibian species are threatened with extinction. And in the last several decades, around 200 species have gone completely extinct. That means they're gone forever. And we know from the fossil record that amphibians naturally go extinct at about the rate of one species every 500 years. So 200 species in 30 years means they're disappearing several thousand times faster than they should be. Even if we took a conservative number and said that only 50 amphibian species have gone extinct in recent decades, it's still a far higher, faster rate of extinction than is natural. And as the human population grows, currently it's about 7 billion people. As the human population grows, which it's expected to do, all these threats will increase and the number of extinctions will increase if we don't do anything significant to save the frogs. So that's why we're all here right now, to learn how to save the frogs from their primary threats, the largest of which is habitat destruction, which is certainly the biggest problem for lowland frogs around the world. Frogs that live in the lowlands have a lot of humans nearby because humans like to live in flat places. We like to live near the oceans. So most of the human population is in the lowlands, but most of our national parks are up high because we like how mountains look. So there's lots of frogs living in unprotected land, and they're getting their habitats destroyed by housing developments, shopping malls, roads, parking lots, people draining the swamps, changing the water flow patterns, etc. So we need to protect wilderness so that it does not look like this horrible, chopped down, used to be rainforest kind of place in Australia. Santa Cruz long-toed salamander lives near me. Only 23 total populations on the planet. 23 ponds on the planet where they're known to exist. And they have trouble surviving because this is what the habitat now looks like in places where they used to live. That's not a natural habitat, and it's hard to cross through that and not get eaten by predators or dry up in the sun or get run over on a road. I was in Colombia recently, and I've been a lot of places in the world where there used to be a lot of rainforest that got chopped down and is now used to grow sugarcane. Sugarcane is usually where rainforests once existed. In Ghana, there's lots of gold mining. Mining is very destructive. So if you ever wonder where your gold, silver, iron, computer materials, all types of stuff that we use in modern day society. It comes from underneath the earth often, and that means people had to destroy the earth to get to it. And this is causing big problems, especially in Africa. Overharvesting for the pet and food trades. People take amphibians out of the wild to use them as pets, especially poison dart frogs, which are brightly colored. Between 100 million and a billion frogs are taken out of the wild each year to be eaten as food. The California red-legged frog is federally endangered. It's been endangered for over 100 years because the California gold miners nearly ate it to extinction. Americans are responsible for 20% of the world's frog legs imports. Invasive species are a huge problem, especially here in California, where non-native fish have been stocked in lakes that naturally have no fish, and therefore the frogs have no evolved defenses against fish. So when the fish arrive, the fish eat the frogs and the frogs disappear. The American West has millions of non-native American bullfrogs now. The bullfrogs are native to the eastern USA. They got brought out west as a replacement food source when the California red-legged frogs nearly got eaten to extinction. And the bullfrogs do a great job of reproducing and living outside their native range. They have a huge mouth and they love to eat native amphibians. They also have lots of diseases that they spread. Pollution and pesticides are bad chemicals that either go straight into the water or they get taken up into the clouds where it rains eventually, and all those chemicals come down in a big rainfall and end up in the closest stream or pond where they get absorbed into frog skin, which is permeable, and they cause lots of immune deficiencies and malformities in frogs and developmental problems. Atrazine is one of the world's most commonly used herbicides. It can turn male frogs into females at 2.5 parts per billion. And 1 week from today, right now, same time, 1 week from today, Save the Frogs Academy, we will be discussing atrazine for a full hour with guest presenter Dr. Tyrone Hayes from UC Berkeley, who is the world's leading scientific expert on the effect of atrazine on frogs. So I definitely hope you will be here 1 week from today to learn all about atrazine. Climate change is a big problem for frogs because climate change means different rainfall patterns. And frogs need rain, salamanders need rain, amphibians need wet places to reproduce. So if the cloud forest they're in dries up, then they have trouble. And that's what happens in the mountains when it warms up. The clouds rise and all that land that used to be wet dries up. Even in Yellowstone National Park, the world's oldest protected area, it's been protected since 1872, there's problems with climate change because there have been persistent droughts for 50 years and the ponds are drying up, and now 3 of the 4 species, amphibian species in Yellowstone, are on the decline because they have less places to reproduce. Chytrid fungus, Batrachochytrium dendrobatitis, is the causative agent of the potentially lethal skin disease chytridiomycosis, which was the focus of my PhD research and is what I will be talking about in about a month on Save the Frogs Academy. We're going to have a full class about the chytrid fungus, which in terms of biodiversity, chytridiomycosis is the worst disease in recorded history. There's no known disease that's driven so many species to extinction. And the chytrid fungus is spreading around the world because humans ship about 100 million amphibians around the world annually with very little disease controls or any kind of legislation or regulation. So we ship sick frogs around the world and they escape or get set free, or the water they were held in get set free, and their diseases go out into the environment and potentially cause significant damage to native frog populations. So that's why frogs are disappearing. Now, why should we save frogs? Frogs are important for a variety of reasons. They're eating ticks, mosquitoes, flies, other disease vectors that spread malaria, dengue fever, leishmaniasis, West Nile virus, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and a host of other diseases that you probably don't want. So the frogs are helping us out, keeping us healthy. They're an integral part of the food web. They are food for birds, snakes, fish, dragonflies, beetles, monkeys. Lots of animals eat frogs, eggs, and tadpoles. And if the frogs disappear, other animals have trouble surviving. Frogs have been of huge importance in human health. 10% of the Nobel Prizes in physiology and medicine have gone to researchers whose work depended on amphibians. The first several decades of cloning research was done on salamanders. This frog here, the southern orange-eyed tree frog, has chemicals on its skin that can kill HIV. One of its close relatives has chemicals on its skin that act as natural mosquito repellents. And there are frogs with painkillers on their skin. There's lots of uses for frogs in human medicine, but if frogs go extinct, then there goes any potential to benefit human health through the continued existence of those frogs. And yes, there is some medical research that is non-lethal and even non-harmful, though as with most things, there are certainly problems involved because not everyone works so ethically. So that's something maybe we can discuss at a future time. There's really very little data, or actually no data that I've ever found, about how many frogs are used in the medical industry. Frogs are bioindicators. That means that based on the health of the frogs, we can determine the health of the ecosystem as a whole, because frogs are sensitive to environmental change. And that's because they have permeable skin that can absorb bad chemicals. They're amphibious. They're dependent on healthy land and healthy water, and they're slow to move. They can't fly off like a bird if something happens to their home. They'd have to jump off, maybe cross roads, and certainly cross inhospitable terrain. And most of them are just genetically programmed to not move once they're adults. By the time they're adults, they've found their general home location, and that's where they hang out. Most movement in amphibians is done when they're juveniles. And frogs have been around for hundreds of millions of years in more or less their current form. They are survivors. They have survived countless ice ages, asteroid crashes. They outlived the dinosaurs. And yet, in the last half century, humans have managed to drive many, many species to extinction and thousands of species to the verge of extinction. So that should serve as an alarm call, a wake-up call to humans that we are significantly damaging the environment, same environment that we are dependent on. And finally, frogs are cool. I like frogs. You all like frogs. Most of you are probably here because you like frogs and think that they're cool. So that is a great reason to save the frogs. The world is a much more interesting, enjoyable place with frogs looking cool, calling, and teaching us a lot about the planet we live on. So there's lots of reasons to save the frogs. And real quickly, here's some easy ways you can save the frogs. And certainly go to savethefrogs.com and check out the How to Help page for lots of more ideas. Don't use pesticides around your house. Eat locally grown organic food. That means it wasn't shipped 3,000 miles using fuel to get to you, and it's not covered in pesticides. Don't eat frog legs. As I said, up to 1 billion frogs are eaten each year by humans. And that's really bad on frog populations, whether they came from the wild or whether they came from a frog farm. Both have lots of problems surrounding them. Slow down driving on wet nights. If you see a frog jumping on the road, there's probably more, so slow down. Never purchase a wild-caught amphibian. Definitely, if you have any thoughts to purchase an amphibian, go to savethefrogs.com/pets, where you can learn about how to be a responsible pet owner, or perhaps you're not even suited to be a pet owner. And in about a month or so, I can't remember the exact date, we will have a Save the Frogs Academy class that Michael Starkey will be leading. That's all about the amphibian pet trade and the associated problems and ways that we can go about making it a more ecologically, environmentally, ethically friendly place. Don't stock non-native plants or animals in your pond or stream. Always stay native on your property. Turn off the tap. If we suck all the rivers dry, like happens in the American West and in lots of places in Australia, then there's no more habitat for stream-dwelling frogs. And how you vote is incredibly important. Do some research on the politician that is running for office. And make sure you vote for a frog-friendly politician. And, very important and very much appreciated, spread the word about the amphibian extinction crisis. As I said, probably the number one reason I started Save the Frogs is that virtually the entirety of our society was thoroughly unaware that frogs were disappearing rapidly. So we've come a long way in the past 5 years with educating people about amphibians, but there's still a long way to go. So tell people about savethefrogs.com, which I assume all of you have been to. If you haven't been to it, savethefrogs.com is our number one way to get information out to you and to the public. And there's several hundred pages of information on the site, and we're always adding more info to it, more ways for you to get involved. Save the Frogs Day is what I consider our most important and most successful project. And I say that because from my experience, it's the number one way to get people to volunteer, to take action, to donate, to get publicity, and just in general, get people educated about frogs. And let's see, on this Wednesday, I will be leading a Save the Frogs Academy class exclusively dedicated to Save the Frogs Day, specifically how you can get involved helping out with Save the Frogs Day, either by volunteering and helping me or by setting up an event in your hometown, maybe at your university or your local nature club or in your school, to get people educated about frogs. So Save the Frogs Day has been growing each year, starting 2009 with 40 events in 15 countries. 2010, we had 104 events in 21 countries. 2011, 145 events in 21 countries. 2012, over 200 events in 39 countries. And this year, we had over 270 events in at least 30 countries. And this number here is actually incorrect. We definitely directly reached at least 17,000 people in person at those events. So Save the Frogs Day is a great way to get the word out, and please mark your calendar for the 6th annual Save the Frogs Day, April 26, 2014. And you may be wondering what happens on Save the Frogs Day. We've got all kinds of things. Basic goal is to get people like you out into your community doing whatever you want to do that you consider enjoyable and educational to do something beneficial in your community for the frogs. So this is a rally we had in Washington, D.C. to raise awareness of atrazine. And after that, I spoke at the US EPA, which is where the rally was held, and talked to them about why they should ban atrazine. We've had habitat restoration events here in Santa Cruz, where there's endangered California red-legged frogs, making it a better habitat for them. Parades in Bangladesh and Ghana to raise awareness of amphibians. Scientists taking people out looking for frogs, showing them native frogs. Lots of schools getting involved, teachers educating kids about frogs. We even have kids who set up their own events and educate their community. So there's no age limits, no age minimum or maximum on saving the frogs. Anybody who is passionate about spreading the word about frog conservation can set up an event and get something great done. We had a 5K in Seattle the last 2 years. We've had a protest outside of San Francisco's City Hall to ask them to stop draining wetlands where there are endangered frogs. A lot of activity in Ghana, where we have a international branch, Save the Frogs Ghana. Here's a Save the Frogs soccer team, our first ever Save the Frogs soccer team in a village where lots of kids like to catch frogs to use them as bait. So we're educating the kids about frogs, and soccer is super popular in Ghana and in a lot of countries. So when people play soccer, there's lots of people watching, and it's a good way to start the conversation about frogs. And as I said, Save the Frogs Day gets a lot of publicity. It's been on the front page of Le Monde, the largest paper in France. And we had a 2-minute spot on CNN, worldwide television. We've had lots of official declarations of Save the Frogs Day from governors and mayors and congresspeople around the country. So it's a good way to educate politicians. And I'm just going to fly through in about 3 minutes and tell you rapidly about some of our other programs before we move on and talk about Save the Frogs Academy specifically. One thing that I've done a lot of to raise awareness about amphibians is giving public presentations. I've given about 229 presentations to over 12,000 attendees. This in schools, universities, other nonprofit groups, government agencies. We've gotten laws in place in Santa Cruz to ban the importation, sale, and purchase of non-Native American bullfrogs. We've gotten a couple restaurants, 2 restaurants and 76 supermarkets to stop selling frog legs. We do a lot of international work. I was in Colombia earlier this year, and we started Save the Frogs Colombia, and I gave a lot of presentations there and hope to return to Colombia later this year to get a lot of people active and organized. There's a lot of people in Colombia interested in Save the Frogs, so we just need to get everybody organized. And I was in Mexico last year speaking to amphibian biologists, Korea a couple years before. We just got back from having our first ever eco tour. We took 14 frog lovers down to Belize and saw all kinds of amazing wildlife. We're putting all the photos together and we'll get them up online. And we'll be back next year to Belize, and I definitely encourage all of you to come. It was a really incredible experience where we saw all kinds of wildlife. Dissections, we've gotten about 18 schools to give up their frog dissections, and Save the Frogs Academy coming up in a month or so. We're going to have a class all about dissections and how we can get organized and get the word out and get schools to stop killing frogs in the name of science. There's lots of science we can be teaching kids, important things about life and about the planet, and killing frogs and driving frogs towards extinction does not fit in my vision of a frog-friendly society. Building frog ponds is a great way to get more habitat for frogs and to educate people about frogs. So we've had schools build frog ponds. This one right here had frogs reproducing in it. Here's a pond that these kids in Colombia built, and they had frogs calling when I was visiting their school. We've gotten big posters up in major airports. This one, I think it's from Denver International. We've got one just like it up in Chicago O'Hare, and they've been up for years educating tens of thousands of people about frogs. We have an art contest that I encourage you all to check out, enter, tell your local teachers. 54 countries have been involved. We've gotten 6,000 entries since we started the contest. And we get all kinds of awesome frog art that I know when people go and draw their frog art, they're ending up on the website learning about frogs because I can see it often in their art. Such as this one, which has the threats to frogs, habitat destruction, pesticides, deformities, frog legs, dissections, pet trade, climate change, and invasive species, all in one drawing. And we also have a Save the Frogs poetry contest, which also is highly educational for the participants because their teachers almost always send them to savethefrogs.com to do a bit of research. We're a 501c3 public charity. That means that if you donate to Save the Frogs, and if you're in America, certainly, then you can use it potentially as a tax deduction. So one other great reason to donate. Not only are you helping us out, Save the Frogs has never received one single dollar from any government, local government, state government, federal government. We've never gotten one single dollar. We are dependent on individuals like you to make sure that we have the funding we need to grow and to get our projects happening, not just in one city, but all around the world. So I highly encourage you to donate to Save the Frogs, especially if you like these classes that we're giving. Then it would be fantastic if you could donate. SaveTheFrogs.com/donate. It's really easy to do. So thanks for helping Save the Frogs and telling everyone you know about Save the Frogs. So we're not done yet. We're just going to move on. On that note, though, you can go. We have a page on SaveTheFrogs.com. Just go to SaveTheFrogs.com and click Spread the Word. And there's lots of flyers that you can download and icons that you can post on your website or your social media to help spread the word about frogs. And there's my email address. If you have any questions, feel free to write me. But first, proudly check out the website because our website answers a whole lot of questions because, as I said, it's huge and got a ton of information. Okay. So what I want to do right now for the next 12 minutes is talk to you about Save the Frogs Academy and some of our upcoming classes. And then in about 12 minutes, we'll open it up, and anyone with a microphone who wants to introduce themselves or anyone without a microphone who wants to send in a few sentences about yourself that I could potentially read can introduce yourself. And then we'll take any questions about frogs, and I can hang out for a while, even after the class officially ends in 11 minutes. As I said, Save the Frogs Academy is something that it had been in my mind for probably a couple of years before I started it. And then it hit me last Thanksgiving or so that the number one way that we can get all of you trained up and involved in the most efficient, effective, productive manner would be to get you taking classes that myself, other Save the Frog staff, and guest presenters teach so that we can spread our knowledge of amphibians. It's great that I know a lot about saving the frogs, but it's even greater when I can pass that info on to you and you all can go out into your communities and make a tangible difference in the world for the betterment of frogs and wildlife and ecosystems and the quality of life on our planet. So the mission of Save the Frogs Academy is to produce environmental conservationists whose skills and experience will enable them to protect wildlife anywhere on the planet. and to direct every student's energy towards relevant amphibian conservation projects that produce true benefits for nature and wildlife. This serves the dual purpose of increasing our organization's total conservation output while ensuring we have highly trained amphibian conservationists far into the future. So, if we dissect that statement a little bit, you'll notice that I want you to be able to protect wildlife anywhere on the planet. That means any kind of wildlife anywhere on the planet, because the skills that you will learn from Save the Frogs Academy, if you persevere and watch or tune into these classes, watch the videos that get archived of the classes you cannot attend, you'll start learning a lot of things that will be highly applicable to saving any type of wildlife anywhere in the world. So especially if your career goals relate to environmental science, this is an incredible opportunity. It's free, it's easy. All you need is internet to log on and listen, and then hopefully get involved in ways that I will be discussing over the next couple weeks on specific ways that you can take part in our programs and help us out, which is the second half of that sentence: direct every student's energy towards relevant amphibian conservation projects. This is different than your average university or school in which you learn about something that somebody did before you and you go home and read it and study it and then prove to your teacher that you learned what somebody wrote about. I don't want you doing that, or certainly not very often. I want you learning by doing. That's how I learned about saving the frogs. I didn't have much frog knowledge. And when I started my PhD, it was only 3 months until I was out in the field doing independent, original research. I had guidance, and I learned it by doing it, by going out in the field and thinking about things. And Save the Frogs, I never had any business knowledge, no nonprofit knowledge. I'd never worked for a nonprofit. I'd never done any of this other than the frog-related stuff. So I taught myself how to do things, and I started doing things, and that's how I learned about it. So that's why I know that Save the Frogs Academy will successfully teach you how to save wildlife, because you will be actually doing projects. Or I certainly hope that you will choose to. I won't force you to volunteer. You're welcome to just listen to the classes, and that's fantastic. But hopefully you will be inspired to take part. Okay, so let's see. Save the Frogs Academy, my overall vision is not solely online classes. They're great to have because they can reach people from all over the world, and we have people all around the world interested in frogs. And we need people all around the world interested in frogs. I also would like to have in-person classes that will require an office or a place to hold classes bigger than what we currently have. I'd love a place with a classroom where we could get people in the local community showing up once or twice a week to take frog classes and get directly involved face to face and helping out with our projects. We also plan to start field courses in hopefully August of 2014. We will have a field course in the southwestern USA in Arizona to teach you about southwestern herpetology, amphibians, and probably reptiles, because there are a lot of reptiles out there. But certainly amphibians, get you out in the field learning about amphibians. And we're also working on setting up a 22-day field course primarily for university students. And that would take place in Ghana, West Africa, where we have Save the Frogs Ghana. And I know that our friends in Ghana could use your assistance. So we'll be setting up a field course and hopefully taking a group of university students, perhaps other people, but focused on university students, taking them out into the field in West Africa, teaching them about frogs and getting them taking part in our projects that we deem important. At some point, it would be great if Save the Frogs Academy could get accredited so that certain people, like students, could get credits that would benefit their current university and help them to graduate. faster. And thinking even bigger, one of the reasons Save the Frogs has been successful is because I always think far larger than the average person. And that's what you need to do too. So, what's the biggest thing, or at least the biggest thing that hit me so far? Save the Frogs Academy. Wouldn't it be great to have an entire university that did nothing but teach people how to save frogs and got people in there learning about frogs and doing projects with an actual campus? That would be awesome. So that's the kind of thing that can happen if you all work hard and hopefully volunteer at some point specifically for Save the Frogs Academy. Save the Frogs Academy, just like any school, needs some kind of administration, promotion. So we don't have a staff for that right now. So hopefully at some point, some of you may want to volunteer your time and help out with Save the Frogs Academy and making sure it's running as effectively as possible and reaching as many people as possible. Okay, so let's move on. You can find the Save the Frogs Academy page if you go to our home page. Currently at the very top, there's a link, but otherwise in this left sidebar, it's right there, Save the Frogs Academy. You can click it and get to the Academy page. Currently, I've got all the classes. Just click this link at the top, register for classes, view the class schedule, and find archived class videos here. That's where we're going to archive videos. And you can see what's coming up. So quickly, I'm going to run through some upcoming classes that we have. And I really hope you will attend as many as possible. If you cannot attend them, go to youtube.com/SaveTheFrogs, where we will be archiving the videos of the classes. So once a month or so, we're going to hold a class like this, Intro to Amphibian Conservation, so that new people can come and learn about amphibians and ask their questions. And so all the classes currently are set to take place Sundays at 5 p.m., Wednesdays at 11 a.m. That's San Francisco time. So we chose one's a weekend, one's a weekday, one's the morning, one's the afternoon. So hopefully everybody can attend at least one of the two, regardless of your schedule. August 14th, this Wednesday, I will be talking all about Save the Frogs Day, what it is, why it's important, how you can take part. And I thank all of you who have taken part. And if you are already thinking about your 6th annual Save the Frogs Day event, then it would be great. Tell us what you're thinking. We can give input. Tell us what you're thinking to inspire other people to take action. And also, you'll be welcome to take a few minutes and just tell us about your experiences. I'm always happy having volunteers speak on Save the Frogs Academy if there's something relevant to speak about, to tell people what you have done. And they may say, oh, wow, that sounds pretty cool. I could probably do that too. Also, this August 17th, Saturday, International Take a Hike Day. That's a day that I created that I haven't had time to promote. Maybe we need a volunteer who can promote it so that we can make sure it's much larger in 2014, but we can still celebrate it. The goal is to get you and lots of people outside. To me, the reason I'm into protecting the environment is from having spent a lot of time outside. I love being outside. I love nature. The more technological our world gets, the less time people spend outside. The more habitat destruction there is, the less time people spend outside. It's harder to find nice places to go. There's less inspiration to go out because people don't even see nice places. So let's get ourselves outside to clear our own minds, and let's get other people outside to connect them with nature. So this Saturday, go for a hike on the International Take a Hike Day, and I should be sending out an email to our email list about it any day. August 18th, a week from today, atrazine with special guest Dr. Tyrone Hayes of UC Berkeley, who is an amazing speaker. Please attend. August 21st, learn how to fundraise. That sure would help Save the Frogs if you could help us fundraise. And you may find yourself so knowledgeable about fundraising after this that you are then able to fundraise for whatever cause you ever want to fundraise for, which may end up being your own cause one day. August 25th, we'll be talking all about the pet trade, problems with the pet trade, how to make it better. August 28th, California's amphibians, natural history and threats. September 1st, how university students can help save the frogs. September 4th, Intro to Amphibian Conservation in Spanish. I will be speaking in Spanish so that our friends in Latin America, whose English may not be that great, can listen in. September 8th, we'll be talking all about Ghana, frogs in Ghana, threats to frogs in Ghana, and the work of Save the Frogs Ghana. September 11th, I'll be talking all about the chytrid fungus, the worst disease in recorded history. September 15th, how to organize a frog event or rally in your city. September 18th, Save the Frogs organizational structure, specifically how you can start a Save the Frogs branch in your part of the world, and how you can volunteer for Save the Frogs and fit into our system of how we do things. I definitely encourage you to attend this one. It sounds strange, but it's very, very important. And it's something that none of you pretty much have ever heard about, because I've only discussed it with our Colombian Save the Frogs fans in Spanish. September 22nd, dissections. Let's get all public schools to stop dissections by the end of 2014. That doesn't leave us a lot of time. September 25th, Sharp Park and invasive bullfrog. So we'll be talking about San Francisco's illegal draining of the Sharp Park wetlands, or specifically their illegal killing of endangered frogs there without permits, and also the problem of invasive bullfrogs in the western U.S., specifically here in California, where we're working to get a statewide ban on importation. Now, notice at the bottom of this page, past classes. You can see some old classes we've had, and those are actually videos that are being linked to there. So that's where you'll find videos if you don't go directly to youtube.com/Save the Frogs. Okay. Now I'm going to end it, I'm going to almost end the official part of class before we do introductions and questions with an assignment for all of you that I hope you can do. Our technology allows us 100 attendees, 100 computers logged into this call. So today's class is the first one. 67 people signed up, and we've got 29 people online listening, which I'm still pretty happy about. 29 people, that's average size of a class in America, but we're allowed 100 people. So we want to max that out every single time. So your assignment is the next class that you attend, certainly get one person, and then you've helped us double the size of classes at Save the Frogs Academy. So if all of you focus on getting somebody that you know who would be interested to attend these classes, then it's a fantastic way to make sure we're reaching as many people as possible. Also on that note, if you are able to share a computer with someone, then please do, because then there's more space for other people. Because once we do max out our 100 people, only 100 people can attend. So that means if you've got a friend or two, then log into the same computer if possible. Okay. Let's see. So that concludes the official part of Save the Frogs Academy's first class of this semester, we'll call it. So if you're wanting to leave or have to leave, then you're welcome to just log off. And otherwise, we've got some questions that people have been typing in, and I'm going to look at a couple of those ones, and then we can introduce ourselves. So 1 second. Oh, so I'll also say there's another place where you can find out what classes are coming up at Save the Frogs Academy. And thank you, Choti, for sending this in. If you go up to the top of our homepage or any page, just click events. And not only does that have Save the Frogs Academy classes, it's got live events that we hold in various places, such as informational tables at festivals, presentations, um, online classes, whatever's going on. And so we have a few things that are coming up right now. There's the International Take a Hike Day, August 17th. There's an event in Sacramento, August 17th, with Michael Starkey, more online classes. And then in August, I will be in Colorado. So if any of you are from Colorado, I'll be at Colorado State University, CSU, in Fort Collins speaking. So keep an eye out on the events page. And anybody who doesn't get our electronic newsletter, subscribe to the free Save the Frogs newsletter. Just click that button. That's where you do it. And definitely, if you can get your friends to subscribe to our newsletter, that is super important to us. The larger our newsletter, the larger our mailing list, the more effective we will be. So please get some friends to sign up. I write most of those newsletters. So if you like my classes, you'll like the newsletters. Okay, so right now, I've already introduced myself. I am Dr. Kerry Kriger, the founder and executive director of Save the Frogs. If anyone wants to learn more about me, then they can go to the Who We Are page up here, and it's easy to find me, and click through to my page to learn more about my background. And so if anyone out there in Save the Frogs Academy land, cyberspace, wants to introduce themselves, then go ahead and raise your hand, and I can unmute your mic and you'll be able to speak. Okay, let's see. I've got Andrew Dubois and I've got Kavya Parikh. I think that's freshly put up there. What country has the biggest population of frogs? That was a question from Kavya. Thanks for attending, Kavya. And Jay, if you're out there. What country has the biggest population of frogs? Well, I'll say that Brazil has the most number of species of frogs. It has the highest amphibian biodiversity with, I think, about 850 species. Colombia has nearly 800 species. Ecuador, I think for the size that it is, has the most amphibian species per mile or kilometer. So a lot of those places in South America, close to the equator, have very high amphibian biodiversity for a variety of reasons. Usually biodiversity is highest near the equator. Okay, so Andrew, I'm going to unmute your mic and you're welcome to give a brief 1 to 2 minute introduction of yourself. And if you have a question, you can ask a question. So you are now unmuted. Hi, Andrew.
Hi. Like you said, my name is Andrew Dubois. I just graduated from college. I'm a recent biology graduate, and I've been really interested in herpetology since I could walk into a marsh. So I've been really blessed to be able to do a little bit of my undergraduate research in the area of disease ecology, working with amphibians and particularly water molds and chytrid fungus so far. So I'm still looking for a job right now, so anybody who's got one for me, go ahead and let me know. But I'm just very passionate about conservation, particularly of herps in general, and this is something that I'd like to get involved with.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Andrew, and good luck on your career search and career path. And on that note, I'll say I know it's difficult to get jobs in environmental science, but it's definitely not impossible. And as with pretty much anything else, if you work harder than anyone else, if you do a better job than anyone else, if you try harder, then you will be able to find employment. So just keep at it. And on that note, I'll say, just from my experience, certainly environmental science, volunteer, do stuff like this, Save the Frogs Academy, and it looks great on your resume. It gets you the experience you need. You'll meet lots of contacts, connections who may help you find your job. So, it sounds like you're doing some good stuff. So I look forward to having you on these classes. Anyone else who wants to introduce themselves? just stick your hand up. And if you already stuck your hand up, please hit it again, and then I can unmute your mic. Okay, so not too many talkative people out there today. Let me see we've got some questions that have come in through the chat. If you want to send a chat to me with a question, then you're able to do that if you look on your screen on your panel. What is the most endangered species of frog? That's another question from Kavya. Yeah, there are plenty of frogs that are considered, there are some that are extinct in the wild, meaning they only exist in laboratories or zoos or museums where they're being captive raised or attempted to be captive raised. And there are also just critically endangered species out in the wild. The Santa Cruz long-toed salamander, I told you, only lives at 23 ponds. In Ghana, West Africa, there's the West Africa giant squeaker frog, which we're trying to save. And there are only 12 known individuals of that species, total 12 individuals. So that's extremely endangered. Here's a question from Nepal. It says, in Nepal, most of the colleges dissect frogs. What are the other alternatives? So I'll add to that from my experience, in most countries outside the United States, when people have to dissect a frog, their teacher tells them to go catch a frog and bring it into the next class. Most frogs are being taken out of the wild for dissections. So one alternative is to use digital software, and there are several programs that exist. Some are free, some are paid, and there are physical models. They're not computer programs. They're just models of frogs that you can take apart. And there's a loan library at animallearn.org. Animal Learn, all is one word, Animal Learn. And they can, if you're in America, certainly loan you dissection software and things like that, just like a library. They'll send it to you, you send it back. Now, there's yet another alternative, which is don't dissect frogs. Don't even do digital dissections. Learn something else. From my experience, lots of people are teaching their students about how to dissect a frog and what the inside of a frog looks like, but not a lot of people are teaching their students about how to save the frogs, or that the frogs are even in trouble, or how to save any type of wildlife. So given that there's always more things to teach students, let's focus on the most important things. And I've never dissected a frog, so I'm 100% certain that having dissected a frog is not critical to one's career in certainly environmental sciences. If you're going to be a doctor or a veterinarian, you can probably hold out until vet school or med school. We don't need our 10-year-olds chopping up frogs, and we don't need most undergraduates chopping up frogs. So I say teach them how to protect frogs, not to dissect frogs, is a great alternative. Let's see. So we had a written introduction. Marcel Douglas from Sydney, Australia says it's nice to join in. Marcel is a zoology postgrad doing a research project on the chytrid fungus and hopes to join us that day when I talk about chytrid fungus. We have Sisto Inchuastegui, whose name I don't pronounce very well, and he's from the Dominican Republic, and congratulates us for having the Academy and these webinars. Charlene from Australia asks if I plan to make a trip to Australia in the near future. And it is certainly my hope to go to Australia in October, November, December of 2014 and not only enjoy Australia because it's a beautiful place, but lead an eco tour there to some of the places that I spent a lot of time during my PhD research and where my highest knowledge of frogs in the field exists. Take people to some beautiful places in Australia to show them frogs, give presentations in Australian schools and universities. And I will be certainly letting people know as plans materialize for that. So we have another question from Raynell Galvis Cruz in Cali, Colombia, who is a undergraduate biologist who has helped set up Save the Frogs Day events and helped organize my trip to Colombia and did a fantastic job. And he says, let's see. I don't fully understand the question. If Raynell is on and you have a mic and want to talk, then raise your hand and we'll get you on, Raynell, to ask that question more clearly. If anyone has any questions and wants the mic. Okay, so here's Raynell. So, Raynell, habla. Hola. Hi.
Hola, hi everybody. My question is about in that zone that we call the hotspots. Here in Colombia, there are many places where there are many diversity of frogs and amphibians in general, but there are many troubles in the public order, poverty, mining, economic activities that maybe generate in the people, um, and they maybe don't understand and don't care about frogs. So what to do and how to do it to get that people and to teach them about the importance of conservate frogs.
Okay. Thanks, Raynell. So Raynell's basically saying there are places in Colombia where people don't have a lot of money and they don't have education about frogs, and that some of their ways to make money are ways that may be hurting frogs, such as mining. There's a lot of mining in Colombia. Or maybe they're catching frogs in the wild to sell them as pets, which is illegal. And this is not restricted to Colombia. We encounter the same problems in most countries in the world where there's a lot of poor people. And it's not even restricted to places where there are poor people, because people with money, just human nature, often want more money. So even here in California, I've been hearing it in the news. Every few days, there's a new article from Central California where the U.S. government thinks that the mountain yellow-legged frogs, one of the most endangered frogs in the world, should receive some protection of their habitat. And there's lots of people uneducated about frogs, or who just for whatever reason don't care about frogs, who are making a loud noise saying, we do not want to help the frogs. It will hurt the people. Government needs to go away and let us do whatever we want. So it's not even about poor places versus wealthy places. It's a pervasive problem in society that people were never educated about frogs to begin with. Most people receive very little education about the environment. Most people spent very little time in the environment. That's why we're having International Take a Hike Day this coming Saturday, the 17th, to get people outside. So from a broad perspective, we need to just keep educating people about frogs. We need to make sure the next generation is raised with a frog ethic so that they don't have to be changed as adults, that they grow up loving frogs, loving wildlife, understanding the importance of nature, feeling a connection with nature. So it's super important that we keep going out and educating kids, and especially in these communities, because we can go into the classes. Teachers are happy to have us come in their classes and talk to kids about frogs. And the kids aren't thinking about, well, maybe I'd like to save this frog, except I can make money doing this or that that may kill the frog. They're not thinking about that. They just like the frogs. They like the way they call. They like the way they look. They've hopefully seen or heard frogs out in the wild and are slightly fascinated by them. So it's easy to get to the kids, and then the kids hopefully go home, and because they loved the talk that maybe you gave them when you went out to their school, they're going to be talking to their parents about how awesome frogs are. And it's very hard to tell a kid no. So that's a good way to educate kids, to educate their parents, and to make their parents agree that, yes, frogs are pretty cool. Now, there are certainly other things we can do. Specifically, if there are communities where their primary financial income is from activities that harm frogs, then ideally what would take place is that Save the Frogs or another organization or the government goes in and trains these people in alternative professions. So our idea in Ghana, we need to raise the money to do it, is to have beekeeping courses in some of these towns. Say there's a town in northern Ghana where they collect frogs to sell them at the market so that people can eat them. If we go there and say, don't eat the frogs, eat something else and get a different job, they're going to say, well, I can't eat anything else. There isn't anything else to eat, and I don't have another job. So if we go there and say, hey, we've got a bunch of free beekeeping equipment, and we've got a really great teacher who's going to teach you a free class on how to do beekeeping and get honey that you can then make more money off of than anything frog related, and that serves as a food source and allows you to buy alternative foods, then all of a sudden you have more educated people in that community with different options. Instead of harming the frogs, they can beekeep. So there's different things you can do like that to train them in different jobs while at the same time educating them about why it's important to stop, doing their harmful frog activities. Kavya, let's see. Your hand is up, so I don't know if that means that you want to talk. If you want to talk, raise your hand again, and I can let you ask your question. Kavya asks, when will I come to Virginia, the original home of Save the Frogs? And Kavya, we have on the line. Kavya, thanks for being here. I'm going to unmute you. Hi, Kavya. Namaste.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
You said namaste.
Namaste. So when's the next time you would probably come to Virginia, Northern Virginia? I thought you could do like a thing for a school maybe.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I would be happy to come to your school the next time I'm in Virginia, and that could be in October. So we'll once I know the specifics, I can talk to your father and we can get something up, and I would be delighted to come talk to your school about frogs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on down the line of questions. Let's see. Daniela from Mexico asks, how many species of caecilians are in the USA? And there are no known caecilians in the USA. And also the question, what is the most important characteristic of amphibians for them to be vulnerable to disease? Now that's slightly vague because I'm not sure which disease, and things always change in different parts of the world. And definitely, as I said, in about a month, I'll be leading a course, a Save the Frogs class, all about amphibian diseases. So definitely attend that. For the chytrid fungus, if you are an amphibian that lives in the mountains, then it's cool. And the chytrid fungus does really well living in cool places. So if you're living in the mountain, then you're at especially high risk. If you live on a stream, you're at especially high risk because streams are perfect vectors for the chytrid fungus. They're taking water long distances, carrying the waterborne zoospores of the chytrid fungus. So they're good for transporting the chytrid fungus all around. And they're also very cool. They're carrying mountain water. So stream-dwelling amphibians that live in the mountains are at high risk of disease-related extinction. And that's why in the mountains of Central and South America, many of those species are extinct or close to extinction from the chytrid fungus having arrived in their high mountain streams. Okay, we have another introduction here. Sarah Miller, an art teacher who has her students enter our Save the Frogs art contest. And she also conducted an art show on the importance of frogs. So that sounds awesome. Thanks, Sarah. I did not know about that. And yes, anyone out there, our art contest goes through October 15th. Poetry contest goes through October 15th. Just go to the left sidebar of our page and click art contest or poetry contest, and you can learn all about it. Marcella, you are on the line. Hi. Marcel? Okay. I'm going to mute you. Okay. The question is, can I teach a chytrid PCR class when I come to Australia? Let's see. I'll say it's not likely to happen, but I certainly possibly could. Those classes require a very high-tech laboratory. I'd need an assistant. I'd need all the chemicals, and it takes a lot of organizing it. The best thing is that you go to savethefrogs.com/QPCR. You can get to it from threats to frogs, infectious diseases, chytrid fungus, and detailed protocol for the detection of chytrid fungus using PCR. And you get to our QPCR page, savethefrogs.com/QPCR, where we have many downloadable materials. So that's, it's possible I could teach a class, but it takes a lot of effort to get it all set up. And I don't currently know where there's a laboratory that I could do that class in. Do we have any other questions from anybody? Raynell, you are on the line. Hi.
Hi again. Well, I should congratulate you for Save the Frogs Academy. I don't know if it is possible that maybe for people in speakers of Spanish, it's very difficult to understand your classes. And maybe we can do some conferences or classes we say the frogs as intermediate in some course. I don't know if you understand me.
Well, I don't fully understand you, but I'll give you two thoughts that I've had. We should have one class a month minimum that is in Spanish, specifically for Spanish speakers. Maybe it won't be on any topic. Maybe it'll just be you come with your questions and let's start a discussion about frogs and just see where it goes. Perhaps we can have these classes specifically in Spanish sometimes on a certain topic. Perhaps we could get some of the leading Latino experts on amphibians to talk about their work and lead a class. It's, this is a web platform, so anyone, we can have guest presenters leading classes, and I'm happy to work on that with you. And the other thing that I'd like to do, every scientist on this planet should speak English. And if they want to their career to improve dramatically, then they need to
Yes,
speak English. And
yes, yes.
my
I understand that, but there are some difficult, but for many people, for example, here in Colombia, that they are non-speakers of Spanish, and maybe that difficult to many people understand the importance of saving frogs in this country, or they are don't connected with the idea of save the frogs. Um, that's why I was thinking about, I don't know if I or some of our partners here in Cali and Save the Frogs Cali that could give some presentation about the importance of frogs or about the topics that you present, but in Spanish.
Yes. Yeah, all that is easy to do. All it takes is the time to find the speakers, train them how to use this go-to webinar technology, which is not very hard, and to set up and announce the classes. And to me, the easiest way to do it is to start by picking a day such as the first Tuesday of every month. And no matter what, on the first Tuesday of every month, there will be someone here, whether it's you or Victor Luja, who just volunteered to help out with this, or um, Alexander Velasquez, or whoever, who, some scientist who likes Save the Frogs, who can volunteer in advance. Yeah, on November the 15th or whatever the date is, I will lead that class and maybe start out with a half-hour talk on their research or their conservation issues, and then open it up to everybody. So I'm totally on board with that. And to go back to what I was saying before, I know it's hard to learn a second language. I've done it myself, but I know that everybody can do it. And I know that in Latin America, almost all of you took many English classes. It's mostly just a mental hurdle of doing it. What I would like to do as part of Save the Frogs Academy, because we as Save the Frogs will be more successful when people in your country, especially the people who love amphibians, speak better English. It's just a fact that if you speak English, you're going to have more options. So what I'd like to do is find somebody, a teacher of English as a foreign language, who will volunteer to once a week or once a month lead a class right here on how to speak better English. And that would be a free class that people, if they're motivated, then they can learn to speak English. At the same time, I'd
Uh,
love it if someone from Colombia or Mexico or somewhere in South America, a native speaker, wants to teach us Americans how to speak Spanish. Because the more of us that speak Spanish, the more connections we can make, and the more people we can send down to your country to help out, perhaps on field courses in the future or volunteering. And I personally know that if I had never had the motivation and determination to learn Spanish, that Save the Frogs Colombia would not exist. And you probably wouldn't be on this call because I never would have had any focus on Latin America at all. But because I speak Spanish, that's all possible. So I'd
yes.
love to get language classes in both directions, teaching people English, teaching
I would
people
like
Spanish.
to.
Okay. So yeah, we'll be in touch. You, me, and Victor will talk about how we can get a regularly occurring Spanish Save the Frogs Academy class going, and maybe we should set a goal on making that, having that all figured out by the time that uh,
Okay,
September 4th is when I will be giving an intro to amphibian conservation in Spanish. So between now and September
okay,
4th, let's have that figured out. And also, just to let you know, I will soon be sending everybody in Colombia volunteer applications with info on how to volunteer for Save the Frogs Colombia and how to apply to have various Save the Frogs Colombia events going.
oh,
Okay? Thanks.
okay, Gary.
All right. So if anybody has any questions, we're going to close it out unless you raise your hand pretty shortly. And I commend you all for sticking around the entire time. And just in general, if you ever have any thoughts on Save the Frogs Academy and what the best way for us to do things is or how we can improve it, then definitely let me know. Current plan, we'll stick with an hour for the classes, and we will keep it open after the official class period for any kind of discussions like this. And there don't seem to be any questions. Glinka, I can't tell if you're trying to ask a question. If you are trying to ask a question, raise your hand and I can unmute you if you want. And it doesn't seem like that's happening. So on behalf of all of our Save the Frogs staff, volunteers, members, donors, supporters around the world, thank you so much for attending Save the Frogs Academy. And as I said, we'll be here every Sunday, 5 p.m. San Francisco time, and every Wednesday, 11 a.m. San Francisco time. I did get a final question from Stacy, who says, Jared and I will be sharing a computer. Should we still both register? I prefer it that if you can share a computer, only one person registers, because we do have a 100 attendee limit. So if you can fit on one computer, all the better. And again, excuse me, your assignment is try to get a friend to be attending Save the Frogs Academy the next time around so that we can grow this academy and make sure that we max out with 100 people on every single one of these classes. All right. Let's see. Okay, we got one more question. Are there academy classes to learn about isolation of chytrid fungus? And on September 11th, 2013, I will be talking about chytrid fungus. I won't be discussing how you can isolate it. That's a very detailed thing. But if you go to savethefrogs.com/QPCR, you can download my free detailed protocol on how you can detect chytrid fungus using quantitative PCR. I'm going to end it right there. Thank you so much for attending. And very soon I will have this video put up to youtube.com/savethefrogs for the permanent archive. And that's it. I'm Dr. Kerry Kriger, founder and executive director of Save the Frogs. And I will see you right here, Save the Frogs Academy, in a few days. Thanks.